Hi, and welcome to the AnyRPG Screenshot Wizard tutorial. In this video, I will be demonstrating how to use the Screenshot Wizard that is included with AnyRPG to quickly make icons for your game that you can use for your weapons or your characters. You can follow along with the documentation at docs.nerpg.org under Wizards, Screenshot Wizards, and find everything that will be covered in this tutorial. If you don't already have a copy of AnyRPG, you can pick one up from nerpg.org/downloads in both a Unity package format or from GitHub as a complete Unity project. For this particular tutorial, I will be using a free asset from the asset store called Free RPG Weapons, and I will have a link to that in the description. In the last tutorial, I created a Bandit character with the character creator, and I didn't give it any particular image. So in this tutorial, I want to show you what happens as a result of that and how to actually give the bandit a profile image and where that will be used. If we start a game, remembering to actually hit maximize on play because I just reset the window to default settings and it always removes that, then when we go to the new game window, if you've been following along in the last tutorial, you'll see that I have a bandit, and if I go to character, he's got a question mark beside his name. Now that question mark is usually supposed to be a profile picture, and it makes a little more sense if you have multiple characters in your game. So let's just add a second character so you can see what I mean by this. So I'm just going to go to my Bandit game manager here, and I'm just going to add a second character creator profile here. And so we have multiple characters to choose from. So I'll add just the default UMA player. And then the bandit as well. So let's press play now and see what difference that made. And now you can see that we have the default UMA player and the bandit, but the bandit has a question mark beside his name because he doesn't have a profile picture set. So let's go ahead and fix that. So what I would want to do is we have a prefab from the last tutorial here, and it should be under prefab character, and we've got the bandit character here. And so I want to actually create a screenshot of his face. So I will go to Tools, AnyRPG, Wizard, Screenshot Wizard. And for the most part, I can just leave these default settings. And I find personally that a character profile looks good if we have just the character rotated slightly so that he's not sort of staring like with this dead blank stare straight into the screen, but more kind of looking off to the side just a little bit. And 256 by 256 is plenty. I'm going to leave the camera clear flags at depth, which will give us a transparent background, so this color here is pretty much irrelevant. And I am going to click on Create. Since the parent folder was screenshots and the file name was Bandit, then my box here is telling me that I can now find that new screenshot in the screenshots folder. So I'll go down to that folder and you can see the bandit. The color on the background looks black right now, and that's just because we have to set this to Sprite, 2D, and UI, and then hit apply. And now you can see that it's actually a transparent background. So I'm now going to go and actually set that as the background on the Bandit unit profile. So in my game folder under the unit profile, we've got the Bandit unit here, and I'm just going to go up to the icon and select the new Bandit photo that we just made. And you can see that's in there now, so then I can exit that Bandit prefab editor and press play. And click on new game and go to character, and now you can see that we actually have a preview showing us what the bandit's face looks like in this list here. Next up, I want to demonstrate how we can use this screenshot wizard in order to create icons for weapons. So I've already downloaded the free RPG weapons pack and imported it into this project. And that's under the Blink subdirectory. And so I'm just going to go find the prefabs folder and create an icon for one of the weapons. To do that, let's open up the Axe 1H Epic and click on Tools, AnyRPG, Wizard, Screenshot Wizard. If you get an error message, like a game object in the scene must be selected, just go ahead and click on whatever the root object in the scene is, and that message will go away. This is due to the way that the screenshot wizard has to work. And by default, when you're looking at this scene view in Unity, there's actually a hidden camera in this scene, and this camera actually has a light attached to it. However, there is no API to access that camera, and there is no API to access the light, which is why you can actually see we've got these light settings, and we actually have to choose an object to attach the camera to and then set these camera settings. There's a really interesting Unity thread that I will link to in the description about something called the default scene view light, and people were wondering how to replicate the exact effect of what was shown in the scene view window if they were attempting to take screenshots of it. And someone from Unity here basically pointed out that there's a camera with a light attached to it, and the intensity is in general 0.75 intensity gray color, although that's not guaranteed to be the same in any future version of Unity. So I actually found that 0.75 intensity is a little low. I like to use a little bit of a higher intensity, but this is the gray color that the guy was referring to. For screenshots, I find that it's generally not a great idea to try to stick the whole weapon in the screenshot, because it will be basically almost invisible or not really look very good on the action bars. And let's actually just go ahead and demonstrate that. So I'm going to take this Axe 1H Epic, and I'm just going to make a screenshot of this axe with it just sort of sitting in the upright default setting. And I'll just click on Create. And then I have already created an Epic Axe item in my game using the new weapon wizard, and I will have a tutorial for how to use the new weapon wizard shortly. For now though, we're just going to assign that image that we've created. And to do that, I have to follow my own advice and not forget to set the Axe 1H Epic to a sprite 2D in UI, because otherwise it won't even show up in the list. There we go. So now we have a screenshot, and you know, it doesn't look bad right now because we're looking at a 256 by 256 image, but when that's shrunk down to 32 by 32 on the action bars, it's not going to look particularly great. So I'll go to the Epic Axe item, and now when I click on icon, it should actually show up in the list here. And there it is, Axe 1H Epic. let's exit the prefab and go ahead and press play. And I have already assigned that axe as the default weapon for the bandit, or for the thief class actually. So we'll just choose the thief class, and you can see that my thief is now having an axe hanging off of his waist there. But when you look at it, you know, it's equipped, and it almost looks like a butterfly or something like that. You can't even really tell that it's an axe. So let's make a better screenshot that'll actually show up well. So I will go back to the prefabs folder and open up this axe 1H epic, and then open up the screenshot wizard again. And what I want to do is basically choose the most distinct feature of this weapon. And in general, I find that something like an axe head usually looks better when rotated at about a 45-degree angle, because then you can really just make it take up the entire frame and sort of get rid of all of this white space that's usually around there. And this time, let's actually go ahead and set a background color on it just for fun. So maybe a red color will be okay. And I'll go ahead and click on Create. And then scroll down to the Screenshots folder. And now we've got this axe on a red background there. And I'll just check Sprite, 2D, and UI and hit Apply. And then set that as the icon for my epic axe item. I'm going to discard the changes because I just rotated that model just for the purpose of making it fill up the screenshot for to get it in the full frame. I don't actually want to save that rotation on the axe model. And now if I choose the thief class and start the game, you can see that this axe is definitely taking up more of this screenshot. Now the red wasn't a particularly great choice because we've got not a lot of contrast there, basically. So let's look at how we could fix that up just a little bit. First, the epic axe item doesn't have any item quality, which means that if it's using a transparent icon by default, it's going to get a brown background. And I want it to have like one of those nice sort of whitish backgrounds that I had. Actually, do you know what? This is an epic axe. Let's make it epic, and then it'll have a purple background as long as the actual icon is transparent. So we will go back into the prefab there and go to axe 1H epic, and then let's give it a nice rotation again, and then open up the screenshot wizard. Still filling up the full frame, looks pretty good there. Sometimes what I like to do is make things a little bit more artistic, and what you can do is to get like this sort of 3D effect happening, we can actually sort of rotate ourselves away from the camera a little bit. And this just makes the icon look a little bit less boring. So I generally like to play around with the rotation to make it look as nice as possible while attempting to fill up as much of the frame of this preview as possible. So that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to leave the camera clear flags on depth. The other option is you could choose skybox, but I find for the most part we want transparent icons, and we'll choose depth. I'm still pretty happy with the lighting, but you can feel free to play around with this lighting intensity to try to get the effect that you want. And we can also set the size on this, 128 by 128. We can turn off the preview indicator if we want. I actually find, even for icons, because it's just going to be a 32 by 32 icon, if you want to save space on disk, just set this size to like 64 by 64. And we can scroll out here a little bit. Just going to change that to a normal handle. And it's kind of harder to see, but this is a lot closer to what this icon is actually going to look like on disk. So let's actually just make it a 64 by 64 image. And we can go ahead and click on OK, and then scroll down to the screenshots folder. Now we have this tiny little 64 by 64 image. We can change it to sprite, 2D, and UI, and now we've got a transparent background on it. And then let's set that as the icon for our Epic Axe item. One thing that I didn't mention is the name of the file. You'll notice maybe that the one that I chose actually isn't called Axe1H Epic. If the file name already exists, then it'll have the current date and time added as a suffix to the file name so that we end up with unique file names in the folder and it doesn't just overwrite whatever the existing file name was. So let's go ahead and press play. And set the class to thief again. Go ahead and start the game. And now that's looking better. It's got a black background on the action bars here, but you can see that if we open it up and actually look at it on the character, then it's got that epic purple background, and similarly if we pull it out to the inventory, it's going to have the same epic purple background. Let's just take a look at making screenshots of one or two more items real quick here. There's some things that work well for certain items and don't work well for certain items. So let's choose, for example, one of the shields. We'll open up Shield Epic. And in this case, shields are pretty nice because they're a nice round object that's basically just going to take up most of the screen. So we can get a fairly nice screenshot by even just taking a straight on image. That'll actually look okay. However, of course, if you want to be just a little bit more artistic, we can rotate the shield slightly. Maybe just like that much, and click on Create. Staffs are a really interesting one because they're a long item, and once again, we don't want to take a screenshot where the thing is going to be basically invisible on the action bars. So what I usually like to do with the staffs is pretty much the same thing that I like to do with the axes. Is I like to rotate them about 45 degrees and then really zoom in on the most unique feature of the staff, which in this case is the head of the staff. And we'll just create a screenshot of that as well. And then now you can see if we go down to the screenshots directory, we've got our flat on shield, which is not looking too bad. That would look pretty good in our inventory. And this would look even more artistic with the shield just rotated a little bit. And this is probably pretty good for the staff because we've got sort of the most unique feature taking up about as much of the frame as we possibly can. And there's one more weapon here that's generally a little harder to make good screenshots of. And I'll show you a couple tips that you can use for that, and that's actually the bow. So the bow, it's not quite as easy as just rotating the thing 45 degrees. For example, there really isn't like a good 45-degree rotation, which is actually going to help us get this whole thing to take up the frame. Most of this frame is going to be empty space, and it's going to look really bad when we put this in our inventory. So there's a couple of tricks that you can use. The first one would be basically just to zoom in like on the handle. Although in this case, this bow doesn't have a particularly big handle, so it's still not really going to look very great as a screenshot. What I usually like to do in that case is rotate this item as much as possible to get as much of it in the frame as possible. And in that case, we can actually sort of look at the bow from the bottom here. And then we actually end up with a rotation that kind of starts working for us. We've got most of the bow in the frame, sort of minimizing the amount of white space by just playing with the angle on this thing until we find something that gets it mostly in the frame. We can also zoom in a little bit here on the handle. And this actually probably wouldn't look half bad as a screenshot for it. Let's just take a screenshot of that and see how that turns out. And that's not too terrible. I think I'd still prefer a little bit more of the frame taken up by this thing. So let's open that screenshot wizard again and just like really zoom in on this thing. I think that's probably a little better. Just select that root object so the error goes away, and then go ahead and click on create. And yeah, it's maybe a little better. It's not necessarily perfect, but we definitely have more of this thing in the screenshot now. Like I said, bows are an interesting one. They're probably the hardest one to actually get a good screenshot of. So you'll have to play around with it, but I think that's enough for this tutorial. So I hope you enjoyed that, and if you did, then don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the AnyRPG YouTube channel. If there's any additional tutorials that you'd like to see in the future, then feel free to leave a comment in the description and I'll try to prioritize them. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time.